begin, if I can start with some housekeeping information. Can I remind all participants that the meeting will be recorded and copy archived for future viewing. Please can all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other people are speaking. And if a participant wishes to speak, please can you put your hand up if you can be seen on screen, or use the raise hand function. If you raise your hand via the function and I miss you, then please just switch your camera on and indicate that you want to speak so that I can bring you in. When invited to speak, please could you ensure that your microphones and cameras are on to ensure that you can be seen and heard when actively participating. And if this isn't possible for any reason, please bring that to my attention or to the attention of the Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function can be used to highlight any technical issues. And as I say, to grab my attention or the attention of the Democratic Services Officer. If you have any difficulties hearing or being heard when you're addressing the committee, then please let myself or the Democratic Services Officer know. So I'm pleased to welcome all committee and non-committee members, cabinet members and our public speakers, and also anyone else watching the live broadcast. Moving straight on to the agenda and beginning with agenda item 1. Are there any apologies for absence, please?
Just Councillor William, Chair.
Thank you. So we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting from the 17th of October. Are members happy to approve those minutes?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. I see Catherine, Councillor Iannucci proposing. Is somebody seconding that?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Champion. Lovely. Moving on to declarations of interest. Are there declarations of interest, please? Ian Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to identify that I know the public speaker this evening. Our children attend the same school, so I've known the speaker for the last few years, but I'm happy that this doesn't prejudice how we consider and treat the public speaker's comments, and doesn't prejudice how we execute our role in this LDP.
Thank you very much, Ian. Councillor Penn.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to declare a personal interest. I do know Alexandra, the public speaker. Our friends, our children attend the same swimming club, but it is no way prejudicial. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So we move on to agenda item 4. This is our only substantive report for tonight's meeting. It's a reference from Cabinet regarding the Vale of Glamorgan's replacement local development plan 2021 to 2036, including the revised delivery agreement and the draft preferred strategy. Given its importance and the Vale-wide impact, I think it's really important that we as a committee give this report as much time and focus as possible. So I've decided to take the reference in 2 parts, beginning with the delivery agreement and then moving on to the preferred strategy. And I hope committee members will agree that, that will ensure that we have a good debate about both aspects of the RDLP. As has already been mentioned, just to make committee members aware, we're joined tonight by a member of the public, Mrs. Alexandra Jenkins, who's here to talk about the concerns of some of the residents of Argyle Lane. Thank you for joining us, Mrs. Jenkins. I'll bring you in at the appropriate time, and just to let you know that you'll be allowed 3 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you.
We also have a number of Vale councillors who are not members of this committee who may like to speak So again, I'll bring you in when it's appropriate. And just to let you know, you'll have 5 minutes to speak on each aspect of the RDLP. Moving on to the report, we'll start then with the revised delivery agreement. This sets out timescales for preparing the RLDP and the community involvement scheme. The committee is being asked to consider it prior to its submission to full council on the 20th of November, with any comments being fed back to Cabinet for their consideration beforehand. Before we begin, just to note as well that Councillor Perry has submitted 2 documents as supplementary information that have been sent to all committee members today. Councillor Perry, you will of course be able to refer to them if you wish to speak later on, and members of the committee may also raise any points of clarification in relation to them when we get to that part of the agenda. Can I now invite Ian Robinson to take us through the revised delivery agreement, please? Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thanks for setting out the main principles of the delivery agreement. It's a requirement of the replacement local development plan that there needs to be a delivery agreement which sets out who is involved in the plan preparation and the timetable for doing so. The original delivery agreement was endorsed by full council in April last year and approved by Welsh Government in May 2022. There has been substantial progress in the writing of the strategy and the development of the plan since then. However, the time frame that was in the approved delivery agreement is not going to be kept to now. There is a permitted kind of 3 months slippage under which you don't have to go back to Welsh Government to ask for agreement on a revised timetable. However, because of the amount of evidence that's kind of required to support sites and the amount of front loading that's required in the process, the kind of the change to the timetable does exceed those 3 months. I think it's probably an indicator of how important Welsh Government sees the adoption of plans, that they did place a tight time frame on councils for writing them. It shows the importance of getting plans adopted, but the system also requires a lot of front loading in order that when we get to this stage we are now, and when we get to deposit stage, any sites that are proposed are supported by adequate evidence to make sure that they're deliverable and viable, and that they're kind of proposed on a robust basis. So for that reason, the delivery timetable has moved. So whereas the original timetable proposed April 23 for preferred strategy, that's now December 23. Adoption of the LDP would now be scheduled for August to September 2026. That's all I have to say, Chair, on that, but of course I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ian. Can I start just by inviting any non-committee members who might want to speak at this stage to speak in relation to the revised delivery agreement? Are there any points of clarification or questions? I see no hands, so I'll invite committee members. Again, do you have any points of clarification or questions for Ian about the revised delivery agreement, please? Councillor Driscoll.
Yes, first question I've got really is the demand. You state there's demand for, I think it's another 2,500-3,000 houses, and yet there's 6,000 plots still to be built on. Why are we pushing for more when we still haven't fulfilled the original LDP? I've got a lot more to say on the Dinas Powys sites, but that's just one question that I'd like Ian to answer to start with. Thank you.
Can I ask you to hold that back, please, Councillor Driscoll, because that will fall into the second part of the agenda when we're actually talk about the preferred strategy. For now, what I want us to focus on is simply the revised delivery agreement, which, as Ian has already outlined, is about timescale. So please do hold on to that question for the next phase of the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I do have a question about the delivery as well. I mean, in the last LDP took 6 years, I think it was, before they actually signed it off. And all that time was the pressure on the councillors to do it. And yet, at the moment, you're saying we got 3, maybe six months to deliver it. Ian.
Thank you. Before you answer that, Ian, if I may, if I can take Councillor Ernest's question or point of clarification, and then we'll round them all up together before we move on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think my only query really is the bodies that have been consulted. I'm aware from the report that because of COVID and GDPR, the actual organisation consulted, that list is quite dated, probably 3 to 4 years old. And there are a number of other important organisations across the Vale, particularly the East Vale as well, who I think might well like to have input into it. But they can deal with that themselves. I simply draw that to the attention of committee. Apart from that, I think the delivery programme, apart from the obvious delays, is acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So if there are no other questions or comments in relation to this aspect, Ian, would you like to just respond to that point regarding timescales, please? Thank you.
Yes, I can do so. I think Councillor Franks had his. Oh, there's a couple of more hands now. Do you want me to answer those, or do you want to take the other points first?
If you respond to that question, sure, about timescales, and then we'll bring the other councillors in. Great. Thank you.
So yeah, we're not in a position where this, and maybe I misunderstood Councillor Driscoll's question, but we're not in a position where we need to be delivering now within 6 months. We've still got best part of 3 years before what we would see as being the likely adoption date now. So obviously if this moves to the consultation phase following council over December and January, we would then look at collating, considering and responding to consultation responses we received during that period. If the strategy then progresses from there, the deposit draft will be written. That's a relatively lengthy period of time, because that's about writing the detail of the plan or the detailed policies that go alongside the strategy. So the process as a whole is fairly lengthy, but it still does have, best part of 3 years to run if we are in accordance with this amended delivery agreement.
Thank you, Ian. Marcus, I can see you also want to speak. Do you want to speak on this issue around timescales? If so, please do come in at this point.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to point out that the timescale is actually highlighted on page 6 of the report, and it makes it very clear there how the system will run and how the various parts or stages of the LDP, replacement LDP, will be dealt with. So if you look at the top of page 6, you will see there the timeline all set out clearly.
Thank you, Marcus. Councillor Franks, did you want to comment on the revised delivery agreement?
I'd like some guidance whether this is the time to mention. I have concerns that the consultation period will straddle Christmas, basically 4 weeks before, 4 weeks into the new year. Now, that is not a very appropriate time, in my view, for members of the public to prepare their arguments and make a contribution. Is that period set in stone, and why have we fixed such a challenge in time? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. We'll take the comments from Councillor Perry and Champion, and then I'll invite you to respond, Ian, if that's okay. Just to say, my understanding is that the Christmas period, that is reflected in the timescales, because my understanding is that it would normally be a 6-week consultation period, and we've extended it to 8 weeks to take account of that Christmas period. But I'm sure Ian will be able to tell me if I'm wrong when I bring him back in. Councillor Perry, please.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, I will second what Chris just said. I think that in terms of how you present a consultation, starting a consultation of a document of such importance just before Christmas isn't going to be very popular. Extending it by 2 weeks, well, fine, but people like to get in there early at the start of the consultation, and the start date is what the public see and hear, and not the end date. So I think, and particularly when I've got concerns over the actual document, I think we need to get the document right and take in an extra few weeks to get the document right and starting the consultation halfway into January, or maybe even the beginning of February. For the public, it's much easier for them to see the start of the consultation at a time that's convenient, not in the run up to Christmas. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Champion, please.
I would propose it goes to 10 weeks rather than 8 weeks. I think an extra 2 weeks is neither here nor there, but I think the perception to the community would be better. And also perhaps this document should not just be saying December, but actually say the 6th of December. And then whatever date is the end of it, put the date in as well. Because we are almost in December. And I think you're right. I'm right in saying it's the 6th of December, isn't it? Anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Champion. Ian, would you like to respond to those comments about timescales for consultation? Thank you.
Of course, thank you, Chair. Firstly, yes, you're correct in the 8 weeks is not the normal period. It has been extended to respond to that fact. I think there's probably a couple of reasons why we still felt it was appropriate to start now rather than delaying the whole thing until after Christmas. Whilst we are able to go back to Welsh Government to ask for a change to the timetable, we have to demonstrate to them and explain to them why the timetable is changing, and we need to be able to demonstrate that we're kind of minimising those delays. Welsh Government, I don't think, would be supportive of us taking longer than we needed to, where we're asking for a change. And I think there's also something to be said for kind of keeping up the momentum with the process. So we've recently carried out a number of engagement sessions with members on the vision, the issues and objectives, and the spatial options and the growth options, and then most recently engagement sessions on the preferred strategy itself. I think we felt that to then take a chunk of time out to start the consultation process after Christmas, in addition to obviously what that does for the overall timeline, it risks losing that momentum in the conversation and the dialogue we're having with members. So that I think it was a balanced decision we took. We did have regard to those points that have been raised. In respect of 10 weeks, I won't commit on that now, but I'd like to have a discussion with the team just to understand how, if at all, that would affect kind of longer delivery, and whether that's a matter then that can be accommodated. So it's okay with Chair and the committee. I will have further discussion on that point.
Thank you, Ian. I think that's really helpful.
And my point about putting the dates in.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sure that will be noted as well, Councillor Champion, to ensure that things are as clear as possible. So thank you very much, committee. So thank you, Ian, for agreeing to take that point back in terms of consideration of whether or not it is possible to consider a longer consultation period, given that we're talking about Christmas across into the new year. Thank you for that. So if we now move on to the second part of the revised local delivery plan, which is the preferred strategy. And just to remind committee, this sets out the proposed strategic direction the council will take in managing development up to 2036. And again, can I ask Ian to take us through this, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chair. If it's okay, I'll share some slides while I'm speaking. They're slides that a number of the members will have seen already because they come from the engagement sessions we carried out recently, but they will assist in illustrating some of the points that I'll be talking to.
Please do.
Okay, can members see the screen now? My screen?
Yes, we can, Ian. Thank
Great,
you.
lovely, thanks. Okay, so as we know, the second part of this report refers to the preferred strategy, which has been developed through engagement with stakeholders, including elected members, town and community councils, and the PSB. Those engagement sessions, as I just mentioned, have related to a number of the building blocks that lead to the preferred strategy, including things like the spatial options and growth options, and then also more recently engagement sessions on the strategy itself. So it includes a number of visions and objectives for the replacement LDP, and it looks at and considers and goes through the various spatial options that are being considered, and how development can be distributed. So 4 kind of principal options were presented to stakeholders and members, and ultimately it was a sustainable transport oriented growth option which received most support. There was also more support for targeting development in areas well served by rail and buses, and promoting affordable housing-led development to meet need in both urban and rural areas, and also aligning housing with employment and focusing near the enterprise zones. The strategy has been refined slightly from the original strategic option, which is now referred to as a sustainable growth strategy, which is principally founded upon the idea of siting development in that kind of sustainable transport corridor, and also in locations which are aligned with strategic employment opportunities, and that's shown on the key diagram on the screen. A range of growth options were also discussed with members, and that set out a series of kind of models which we looked at to try and consider what is the most appropriate growth level for the Vale of Glamorgan. Different growth options would be likely to bring with them different kind of demographic impacts, different impacts on the composition of the Vale. Ultimately, a medium growth option was more popular with members when we carried out those sessions, and we've identified that as being somewhere between 430 to 550 dwellings per year. Important thing to note with kind of level of growth and housing numbers is that whilst the preferred strategy identifies just between 8,000 and 9,000 dwellings, that's about 7,000, just under 7,900 dwellings, plus a 10% kind of allowance for things that might not be deliverable through the course of the plan. But critically, over 6,000 of those are already kind of proposed on sites which are either existing allocations which could be rolled over, or existing sites with planning permission. So essentially, this strategy identifies a proposal to find just over 2,500 homes on new sites. And as members that were at the engagement sessions will have seen, the preferred strategy identifies what we consider to be the key sites in the LDP. Now, I won't go through all of these in detail now. I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion on them, but in summary, they are sites that land at North East Barry. The slides here show some indicative details of kind of how the site could be developed in principle. A site at the north of Dinas Powys, a site at Reader's Way in Roos, and then also sites in St Athan. Now, that's not to say these would be the only sites that would form part of the plan, but these are what we consider as being the key sites. So just some key points in general, really, to support that context. National policy in Future Wales puts the Vale of Glamorgan in the national growth area. And in order for a local development plan to be adopted, we will have to demonstrate compliance with national policy. If we don't demonstrate compliance, then it's highly likely that Welsh Government would object to the plan, and or the planning inspector who examines the plan not finding it to be sound, because it is a fundamental requirement that we have to align with national policy. That means that we have to see a level of growth in the Vale of Glamorgan. If we don't propose a level of growth, then we can't be seen as according with national policy. And critically, having a local development plan gives us the ability to structure that growth and direct it to the places which are most appropriate. So the candidate site process has seen a lot of sites proposed to us for development, and it's our job to examine all of those, look at the constraints, look at how they relate to existing settlements, and decide what is the best way of proposing that growth. We believe that these sites before you tonight are the key sites that do that in the most appropriate way. That's the core of this, is really the importance of having a plan adopted, and actually what it means if you don't have a plan. So if you don't have an adopted plan, you don't have that structure to direct where growth goes, you don't have that policy basis for governing the decisions you make every day. But critically also, as everyone knows, we have really high affordable housing needs in the Vale of Glamorgan. And in order to try and put a meaningful dent in our affordable housing need, we do need sites which are a mix of market housing and affordable. We're not going to be able to make a significant contribution to affordable housing need purely by relying on affordable housing developments alone. So it's, to officers' mind, alongside the importance of aligning with national policy, dealing with our housing crisis is one of the absolute key things we have to be doing. I touched earlier on kind of the demographics and how different levels of growth result in kind of different probably demographic impacts. So in our view, the level of growth that's proposed in the strategy would realise a kind of a younger demographic than is currently the case in the Vale, and there's really good reasons for supporting that approach. What it does for the vibrancy of communities, sustaining existing services and town centres. So we see that as being a real positive. And we want the plan as a whole to be a positive plan which balances environmental needs and gives them greater priority than plans before have, but at the same time, an optimistic and positive plan that plans for growth, plans for jobs, plans for the housing that people need. I think we recognise that planning for thousands of houses is not an uncontroversial. Stop sharing. It's not an uncontroversial thing. Level of growth will always be concerning to the public, who understandably recognise that growth brings with it other things. It brings with it some traffic on the roads, it brings with it some pressure for services, but critically, the developments we put before you tonight, we believe, have the opportunity to deliver better infrastructure to support them. And I think I just emphasise to members that this isn't the final plan. This is very much the strategy. There's a consultation process that follows this, and then following that consultation process, officers will be reporting back on the responses received and the ways in which we propose to change the strategy as a consequence, and that will need to be approved by council. But for now, this really is kind of the principle of development, where we see those development zones as being, and yeah, the detail will follow in the deposit draft. That's a summary, I think, Chair, for now, but of course, again, happy to respond to questions.
Thank you very much, Ian, for that very helpful, clear presentation. Before I bring councillors in, can I invite Mrs. Alexandra Jenkins to address the committee next, please? And just remind you, Mrs. Jenkins, you have 3 minutes in which to speak, and you're very welcome here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so firstly, with regard to infrastructure, what are the proposals to cope with the additional thousands of cars commuting to the motorway or Cardiff when the current routes pass 3 schools? The effect on Arger Lane and the Westra, which cannot cope with the current levels of traffic and cannot be widened due to the residential properties backing onto the lane. What traffic surveys and air quality surveys have been considered? And would consideration be made to make the current Arger Lane and Westra an access only and foot and bridle path in line with the Active Travel 2013 policy? The plan talks about a 20-minute walk to Cadoxton. This is misleading. I've walked it myself. It also talks about the rail and bus links, which again are misleading. Mains drainage and gas. The current occupants of Arger Lane and Westra do not connect to gas mains or main sewage. In fact, Welsh Water already have to attend Arger Lane to power flush the hydrants due to water quality control. So a floodplain, by affecting and changing the land to make this safe to build, this increases the risk of the land becoming a floodplain like its neighbouring fields due to the natural water table level. There is an assumption at planning level there will be provision for surface water, SUDs, pumping stations, etc. And this will simply deal with the additional runoff. However, the Westra and Arga Lane flood weekly in its current state as it is today. What consideration and additional provisions will be put in place to deal with this? Sustainability, where are the jobs coming from to support the 1,500 houses in view of the enterprise zone and model farm development being on hold? Would these need passing first? What are the services with regard to doctors, dentists, A&E, etc.? 5 years ago, the traffic survey at Colfhouse Cross stated the traffic was already at 120% capacity. What consideration has been made to the extra use needed when your plans already state rush hour traffic in the Vale is excessive? What consideration has been made to the landowners whose land form part of the site needed? Will there be risk of CPOs due to mixed use at the Barry site? And how does the Barry site meet the criteria set out in the candidate assessment methodology criteria of June 2022, particularly in relation to sustainability? Section 8 of the candidate site criteria could arguably put this land as a red zone due to the availability of the land within the 2036 period and the number of landowners. Why have you now chosen to go against the last LDP boundary settlement? There's concern that this will merge the boundary lines between Barry, St Andrews, Dinas Powys and the significant loss of green space. Recently, Cabinet discussed areas that form part of the settlement boundaries being considered and review at the Vale. This site was not mentioned, however, this land is labelled as North East Barry, when clearly this is merging with St Andrews and Dinas Powys. Have you exhausted all of the key sites outlined in the previous LDP? If not, why not? And will these sites need developing first? Why have the equestrian bodies not been considered as a statutory consulting body on the LDP, given the usage of the land by the equestrian community and the further use of Arga Lane and the Westra as effectively a bridleway? What consideration has been given to the statutory requirements and environmental concerns that the kennels location poses as a risk to this site? And why did you disregard the brownfield sites as a strategy for housing before the draft preferred strategy was published? And I'm happy to share those notes if you did. I appreciate it was long.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Jenkins, and thank you for managing to raise so many points within the allotted 3 minutes. Can I, if you could just stay on screen just for a few moments. So can I just check committee members? Do you have any points of clarification for Mrs. Jenkins, please? Yeah, I'm going to go to committee members on this. So if I can invite Councillor Champion, please.
Hello. Are you speaking on behalf of the resident group to the southwest of the proposal?
Yeah, so it's the northeast of Barry proposal, Councillor, that I'm speaking on behalf of. The residents of Arga Lane and the Westra have all pulled together, which is lovely as a community, to raise these concerns as early on as possible.
Yeah, as I'm not sorry, I don't know where Arga Lane is, but is that towards? There's a plan that shows the development and then some housing to the southwest.
So it's very difficult to see because we live on Arga Lane in a farm. Mr. Robinson, are you able to help to try and point out on the plan, please, where we are, if that's okay? It's difficult because it's 174 acres, this site, so it's really difficult because we're a small part of that, so it's difficult to try and explain.
So it is, Councillor Champion, do you know where St Richard Gwyn Catholic High School is?
Sorry.
Do you know where?
The point was really, she is a local resident that's really impacted by this.
That's correct, Councillor.
Yes, I'm speaking on behalf of other residents in the area, as I understand it, Mrs. Jenkins.
That's correct. So Mr. Robinson can show you there now, I think. So effectively, because the site is so vast, so that whole area there is 174 acres, which takes you from the start of Arga Lane right the way up past Liddles and up to the top. So, Mr. Robinson, can you just, where your hand is there, can you just drive up Arga Lane and through the Westra? So this is Arga Lane past the school. We are then on the right-hand side there. This is Arga Lane, and then you turn right onto the Westra there. So it's all of this area, which is currently like a very, very rural area, which all of the area on the left hand, so So, Mr. Robinson, can you where the blue area is with where the school is proposed, all of that
can I
there?
just check before you do that? Does that answer the issue that you needed to have clarified, Councillor Champion? Are you clear now on what the area was?
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
thank you.
lovely. Thank you. And as I say, I am just inviting committee members to seek to raise any points of clarification. So if I go next to Councillor Perry, please.
Oh yeah, I don't think I've heard so much spoken in 3 minutes in my entire life.
I'm sorry.
it's like, where do you start? So quite clearly then you've raised a lot of good questions. There's a lot of concern, and I guess I'm concerned that in this meeting we can't take in those answers and digest it properly as we sit at home here as we are, and actually make an informed decision on the issues that you've raised. So that is my personal point of view. It's a bit of a whirlwind, make my hair's all blown black.
I do apologise, Council.
That's fine, but no. and thank you for coming in early. But that is my position now. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for Ian Robinson to answer all those questions in enough detail, at least for me, in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for making that point, Councillor Perry. Councillor Driscoll, please, any point of clarification, please?
Yes, thanks, Alexandra. Excellent presentation and plenty for Ian to go on with there. All the residents in your group, they all class themselves as living in Dinas Powys, don't they?
Correct.
Is that correct? Yeah, which did surprise me why it's down as north of Barry. I'm just wondering if you can answer that question as well. But apart from that, yeah, you've asked most of the questions I think most of us would like to ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper, please. Any points of clarification for Mrs Jenkins?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Alexandra. Can I just ask how long it did take you to walk to Cadoxton Station?
So from our house to walk to Cadoxton Station, it took about 38 minutes. Bearing in mind we're at the bottom end of the site, and because of the vast size of the site, it would take at least 20 minutes to walk the site anyway before you even get to the Littles estate, which is where the proposed new track would be effectively for the links. So my opinion is it would take probably 45 to 50 minutes to walk there. Okay. And realistically, Chair, sorry, go on.
Chair, if I could just follow that up with a question of further clarification.
If it's clarification, yes, and then I'll move this on.
And Mrs Jenkins, do you think that was deliberately misrepresented?
I don't think necessarily.
Can I just stop you there? I think that's a very unfair question, because the implication when you talk about deliberate misrepresentation, I don't think that's helpful. Mrs Jenkins, I'm not going to ask you to respond to that question. Councillor Hooper you'll have the opportunity later in the debate this evening to raise that question, but I don't think it's fair, Mrs Jenkins, to ask you to respond to that. So just to say thank you very much for your contribution tonight. Of course, we're going into a period of consultation, as we've already discussed this evening. So do please, I'm sure you will submit those responses to the RRDP, because we're not going to expect officers to respond to all of them this evening. But thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the committee meeting, but equally, if you want to get on with your evening and leave that's fine. Either way, if I can ask you to switch your camera and your microphone off at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me be able to speak tonight. I really do appreciate it on behalf of us all residents.
We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you. Can I now invite any non-committee members who'd like to address the committee to do so? Yes, Councillor Campbell, you gave us advance notice that you'd like to speak. Thank you. That's very much appreciated. So please do, and just to remind you that you've got a maximum of 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. The draft preferred strategy based on the sustainable growth strategy you are here to scrutinise today is flawed in many reasons. The sustainable growth strategy is made up of 6 key elements. The first being delivering a sustainable level of housing and employment growth supported by appropriate infrastructure to accord with the Vale's position within the Cardiff capital region. As is the same for all proposed sites in the draft preferred strategy, they only focus on employment areas and no infrastructure, e.g. extra medical facilities and schooling. The only site that offers additional building of schools is the land at the north-east of Barry. Focusing on Roos, both doctors' practices operate out of one building in Roos and are hard to access, and each have different times or areas of practice spread across multiple sites in the Vale: Roos, St Athan, Lantwit and Barry. So you require transport between these. No provision is made for expansion. In the draft preferred strategy 3.29, it's quoted to say, however, there is relatively limited public transport availability in the rural, remote areas and between its major towns, which is limited access to facilities, services, and particularly for disadvantaged groups. There has been no provisions made to improve doctor surgeries and also no research into current doctors' practices that patients currently face on a daily basis. This is counterproductive in regards to the Welsh Transport Strategy 2021, which states the need to bring services to people in order to reduce the need to travel. The second key element is aligning locations for new housing, employment, services and facilities to reduce the need for travel. As stated earlier, the site that offers extra schooling is the land to the northeast of Barry. However, this needs to be built. In the draft preferred strategy 6.11, it's quoted, the spatial strategy will seek to locate major new developments in places that are well served by services and facilities. So it's counterproductive to create a settlement so large in one place that goes against this and cannot access current facilities when they are needed to be built. Proposals in Roos and St Athan are heavily weighted on model farm planning developments and the enterprise zone expansions. The details of this position of the proposed model farm development are mentioned multiple times in this document, and the planning committee decided not to approve this planning application. Broad Hathen has been mostly empty for years, so what is the incentive for places of business to suddenly take up residency on this site? The Vale of Glamorgan Local Transport Policy 2015 to 2030 seeks ways to secure better conditions for pedestrians, cyclists and public transport users to encourage changes to travel choices. Active travel improvements in Roos have mostly been paid for by S106 contributions to date and have been completed to somewhat a poor standard. Current active travel works have been delayed to 6 to 8 weeks with no communication with ward members or residents. Last year, councillors voted to a change to council constitution allowing for enforcement of pavement parking. I've raised this with active travel team multiple times, and the new cycle paths have just become extra parking for cars and have become absolutely useless as walkways and cycle paths. No enforcement has happened to date. Therefore, the Active Travel Act 2013 has just become a box-ticking exercise when there is no follow-through from local authorities to create the vibrant rural communities with sustainable travel, as is the Future Wales National Act that is quoted so many times in this document. The third element states focusing development in locations that are well served by existing and proposed rail stations as part of the South Wales Metro and in areas with good bus links. Within the draft preferred strategy, there is no mention of bus services, only trains. Councillor Stephen Yarnham stated in Cabinet on the 2nd of November that this is all about trains. The St Athan, which is noted in the draft preferred strategy as having 2 key development sites, doesn't have a train station. The nearest train station is Roos. It's stated in the draft preferred strategy 2.23 that discussions are ongoing with Transport for Wales and CCR regarding the potential to deliver a new train station in St Athan, and a sufficient quantum of new development in this locality will help to support the business case for any proposal. The wording on this quote suggests houses come first before the potential train station, which is against the Welsh Transport Strategy 2021 because you're not allowing potential new residents of St Athan to choose to use sustainable transport links. Just to note that I spoke to Transport for Wales last week, who confirmed that there's been no further discussion since the feasibility study was conducted, and there's not been any funding set aside for this project. The metro system.
Sorry, Councillor Campbell, can I ask you to bring your comments to a close, please? Thank you.
Okay. I just want to mention that I've actually done research about buses. There isn't any buses running in Roos. At the moment, the land at Reader's Way is on a green wedge, and that's not actually mentioned in this. There needs to be more planning around this. And there's a lot more research that needs to be done. This draft preferred strategy is not ready. It shouldn't be going for public consultation. And we actually have a right as councillors to do our job properly. And I don't think that this draft preferred strategy is ready at all.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Any other non-committee members who want to speak on the preferred strategy, please? Councillor Franks, please, and again, at maximum of 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'm not surprisingly going to focus on the Dinas Powys and what's misleadingly called the Barry sites. There's a huge risk if these two sites are progressed of simply eating up all the land between Barry and Dinas Powys and Llandoch. Look on a map and you see once you breach the Docks Link Road, then there's no natural boundary that presents itself to stop another 1,000, another 1,000 and another 1,000. And the same is true at north of Dinas Powys. Now, Mrs. Jenkins did a brilliant job, absolutely brilliant job, in raising a whole number of very relevant issues that really need to be answered before this matter can be progressed. And I would personally be very grateful if the Democratic Services could send me a copy of her evidence. But I'd like to focus on 2 points that have been raised. First of all, how close Calixton Station is. We've heard 15 minutes away, and yet Mrs. Jenkins took 30 to 35 minutes from her property, which is the southernmost part of the area in question, to get to Calixton. And that's, by the way, going downhill. And also the serious lack of medical facilities in the area, and growing problems with surgeries in Penarth having closed in the last year. The Northeast Barry site is basically car focused. There can be no pretense of this being a active travel type development. It is totally and utterly car focused. The Dinas Powys site, with access onto the main Cardiff Road, the A4055, has struck people as being absolutely astonishing, that we're talking about putting directly onto one of the busiest roads in the county cars from 250 extra properties. So I'm dismayed by the evidence that has been provided for these sites, and I really do not see how a committee can accept them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. So I don't see any other hands raised from non-committee members. Can I just check with committee members, do you have any points of clarification for the previous two speakers? Councillor Champion, please.
Sorry, it wasn't clarification. I just wonder whether you're getting to members to...
We will move on to the debate proper. I just want to ensure that Scrutiny Committee members don't have any points of clarification for the previous two speakers, and as there aren't any hands raised, before we move on to the debate proper, Ian, there was an awful lot of information raised tonight, so we're certainly not expecting you to be able to respond to all of that. But are there any points that were raised either by Mrs. Jenkins or the non-committee members that you would like to respond to before we move on?
Yes, yes, there are. Yeah, thank you for confirming about kind of the detail. I think a lot of the points are kind of relevant points to the process that would and should be made through the consultation process. There are some. I'll try and sort of summarise on a few things which might kind of cover off a few together in principle. It has been called North East Barry, the North East Barry / Dennis Paris site in the draft preferred strategy. I understand where members of the public are coming from when they say, well, it's in a different ward. It's physically closest to Barry, and if forming part of a plan, if approved, if built, it would kind of functionally and physically represent essentially an extension to Barry. I think if we'd have called it Dennis Paris site, then people in Barry would most likely have said, "What are you talking about? This is attached to Barry." So it's a name, but I think we're all clear. I think the main thing is all clear on where the site is, what the relationship of the site is to the respective settlements. So I don't think anything about the process is prejudiced by whether whether one is of the view that it should be called one thing or another. In terms of the distance, so Transport for Wales provide like isochrone maps for cycling and walking. So the site at, I'll call it North East Barry because that's what's been called so far. The site at North East Barry is shown on those maps as being 15-minute cycling from Cadoxton, and the southern part of the site is within 20 minutes walk of Cadoxton. That's not to say all the site is. And just to comment on what Councillor Frank said, I think based on Mrs. Jenkins' description of where her house was on Argyle Lane, that is not the southernmost point of the site. There is a good portion of the site that's closer to Cadoxton. Obviously, I can't speculate on the travel times of individuals, but we're going on the evidence we have in terms of the TFW isochrone maps. A number of the points, and I'm trying to deal with these kind of as a group just for the sake of kind of brevity and moving on, but that's not to say that I'm dismissing them individually, but a number of the points that Mrs. Jenkins makes are points which necessarily rely on a level of detail that is kind of that happens after the preferred strategy stage. Now, what we didn't want to do was provide a preferred strategy which just said, here's the favoured spatial option, here's a favoured growth option, and do nothing in terms of identifying sites. I think we felt it was more appropriate and more beneficial to identify sites, but unavoidably at this point in the process, because of, I say, the level of evidence gathering that's required, we can't have answers to all the detailed points. So a lot of traffic modelling and transport modelling will need to happen after this stage to inform whether sites stay in the preferred strategy, whether they stay in the deposit plan. But there's the way that the kind of the local development plan process works is like building blocks. You can't decide on day one if a site's acceptable, and you collate the evidence, and the more you have before you as the kind of the process goes on, the better position you become in to kind of feel confident about the impacts of the site and how they can be mitigated. So a lot of things about statutory undertakers and availability of infrastructure, a number of the kind of the access and highways points are things which are very relevant points, but things which require more work as we move towards deposit stage. It's not in the flood zone, so for any development to be acceptable, it would need to show that it can mitigate any impacts in that respect. And we see that now when we have planning applications. Generally, they need to be, the evidence with a detailed planning application needs to demonstrate that you can achieve no worse than greenfield runoff rate, and a development won't be acceptable, otherwise. But again, that's a very detailed thing. We couldn't reasonably expect developers to be able to say exactly what their layout is going to be, exactly how they're going to mitigate for the drainage and kind of surface water, impacts associated with a specific development. I'll move to Councillor Campbell's comments. We are in consultation and in discussion with the health board, so it's, you can look at it as a bit kind of chicken and egg, looking at kind of health demands, and not just health demands, but in this case health demands and sites in a new development plan. So you have to move in some way towards looking at what your preferred sites are in order for the health board to kind of do that level of work to understand what need is. In the reverse, the health board can give, theoretically can give comments on, where demand is, where services are, but it's a kind of an iterative process. So, if this preferred strategy is agreed by council and we move to consultation and move beyond that, we will be relying on further discussion and further evidence from the health board about the availability of services. It is a complex matter, the delivery of healthcare. It's not something that principally the council is responsible for, and whereas we use Section 106 contributions to deal with, in the main, kind of service issues and infrastructure issues which the council are responsible for delivering on, such as education and transport. It's not so straightforward with healthcare. The system of funding and financing is different, and we have to look at viability when we're looking at sites. So as with anything in planning, looking at healthcare and looking at health demand and the existence of existing facilities, it's a balance of kind of what is needed alongside what is needed in terms of meeting affordable housing need and what's needed in terms of infrastructure and open space and education. It's very much key to the work we're doing now, and I say it's very much a key part of how we would move forward through this process towards a deposit plan. In terms of employment, yes, so sites are identified in the strategy for St Athan. There's not just the enterprise zone at St Athan and by the airport, and we also have a site which has been proposed in the plan through the candidate site process at Aberthaw. Officers see this as a really exciting opportunity to do something of regional importance, a centre for growth and jobs, and a kind of a hub to strengthen our economy, at not just at the airport, not just at the enterprise zone we know at St Athan, but also Aberthaw, and the scope for high tech and green industries and energy uses there. So yes, I would say it's a kind of a proactive and a positive and an optimistic strategy in that respect. We don't feel, given our position in the growth area, that the right approach is to say, well, we don't think jobs are going to come forward, we're not going to allocate any growth. We think the reverse of that is what we should be doing, in order to reflect our position in the growth area and to strengthen our role in the region. Marcus, sorry, do you want to add anything on that point?
Thank you, Ian. I'm grateful for you providing such a comprehensive response to the issues that are being raised so far. I'm conscious committee members are very patiently waiting in the wings so that they can also comment. But Marcus, please do add anything that you think would be helpful.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was just really to point out that obviously reference was made to St Athan and the enterprise zone and being full and there being no more capacity for jobs. And I think it's worth pointing out that Welsh Government are at the very early stages of demolishing quite a swathe of buildings on that site, now that the RAF and the military have vacated the whole of the site. From within, there's a small military enclave left, but the majority of the site is now vacated. So what was known as East Camp, where a lot of training was taking place, that is now due to be completely demolished and will be land that is made available for new development. So I just wanted to flag that up, that and to point out, which Ian is very ably doing, that unfortunately none of these things are stuck in aspect. And while we may be talking about something now, we are talking about a plan which will serve us till 2036. And I think it's important to note that we are looking to the future with some of these things, and we have to. And Ian's obviously pointed out it's optimistic in some respects, but when we look at jobs, we have to go with what the information is before us. We have St Athan, which is a growing site. We also have Aberthaw very close to that, which is also a growing site. So just wanted to point that out as well. Thank you, Ian.
Chair, can I just add one more point on that?
Yes,
very briefly, and then I'll allow you to move on. Just in respect of conversations with TfW and feasibility work for a train station, it's very much an active and ongoing conversation. Again, delivering a train station is a complicated and a complex matter, and something that has a timeline attached to it. But I just wanted to make sure there was no kind of doubt about the fact that there is, like I said, a very active and ongoing dialogue, and it is not something which is a former discussion that's no longer going on.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And as with all these things, I know, for example, health impact assessment has already happened and been very much part of the process, but this is a long-term strategy, and my understanding is that any significant changes will go back to those key organisations who we'll be partnering with in terms of the development, so that assessment will continue to be made through the life of the revised plan. So, committee members, we've heard a lot of information tonight, but can I invite you, if you've got any comments or questions, to come in? Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Iannucci first, please.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Ian. I just wanted to ask, unsurprisingly, I understand that it's North Barry / Dinas Parish. It's very close to the border with Carrick, my ward. Partly a clarification point is that I do think lots of people in the consultation are going to tell you that 15 minutes would be, 20 minutes would be a very quick walk to Carrickson train station. And obviously the north of the site then would be probably considerably longer. In the document, it says that it would be a 20-minute walk from the south and a 15-minute cycle from the north. I was just wondering why the switch in measurement, because so if I'm not a cyclist, I understand how far 20 minutes gets me. I don't know how far 15 minutes gets me on a bike, so the distance is obviously longer. I was just wondering if we could use the same measurement for both to give people a clearer idea, because, like I say, a 15-minute cycle is probably looking at maybe a 40-minute walk at Google Map speed. But I think that would be relevant to people who would want to know the difference. And then I was wondering as well, so the people who who would potentially live at the north of the site, so if they were looking at around a 40-minute walk, it's good to hear that Transport for Wales are having a feasibility study discussion with you. Just wondering if there were guidelines on how far away people ideally should be able to get to a train station or something like that. If there's any kind of guidance on that, it would be interesting to know.
Thank you, Councillor. Ian, we'll take a couple of comments if that's okay, just in case there are some common threads, and then I'll invite you back in. So, Councillor Champion.
Yes, this is the first time I think I've had a look at the Barry North site, because it wasn't part of our briefing, and yeah, I can see that it's possibly 900 within the plan and 1500 in total, so it's really a big chunk of housing, and yet it's not brilliant for sustainable transport, and some more legwork does need to be done on that. St Athens Station, that really does, you do need to really press on with that, and also Cowbridge candidate sites could be another 400, 500 houses, and yet Cowbridge is not mentioned at all in this strategy. So are those sites not really going to be, or are their candidate sites not going to be used, or are we going to have another 400 houses in Cowbridge?
Councillor Driscoll, before I bring you in, because those were very specific geographic-based questions, Ian, could you respond to those points, please? And then we'll bring in Councillor Driscoll and Councillor Ernest. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Firstly, Councillor Iannucci's point. The TFW maps provide information on cycling and walking, so that's why we kind of sought to provide for both. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what the isochrones show for the northern part of the site. We use 20-minute walking as being good access to to a station or a service. There's no black and white, within this distance is acceptable, outside this distance or this time is not. Planning is very much a balance of a lot of things. So in an absolutely ideal world, a site for growth in Barry of this size would be, on the edge of the town centre, within 5 minutes of walk of everything. Barry is constrained, so we've had candidate sites in over the course of this plan and previous plans, all around the perimeter of Barry, and there are a number of kind of physical and environmental constraints, which mean that a lot of the land around Barry is not suitable for development. This is not encumbered by a number of those constraints, and I accept that it is not as close to the town centre as, like I say, as you would if you had absolute pick of absolute optimum sites that were perfect from planning perspective, then it would be closer to the town centre. But it's a balance for us of the fact that we're in the growth area. I know I said this before, but we have to demonstrate a level of growth. Barry is our most sustainable settlement, and it would be very difficult to justify a strategy for the Vale of Glamorgan without a level of growth in Barry. And I would say a walking or a cycling distance of the type we're talking about in Barry to to a local retail centres, to a train station, and obviously with the availability of services slightly further afield in the town centre, arguably is still more sustainable than a site which is closer to the centre of a much smaller settlement. So for us, it's a balance of distances versus what Barry offers. No one's pretending that people living in this site aren't going to make car journeys. Inevitably, they will, of course. But even car journeys from this site would be very short car journeys to a vast range of services that one needs to be served by on a day-to-day basis. In summary, no, there's no black and white about distances. It's a balance for us of distance versus what's on offer within the settlement. And in terms of what Councillor Champion said, no, we're not looking at a site of 400 or 500 houses in Cambridge that would be appearing in the preferred strategy if that were the case. I can't confirm now the whole range of sites that we would be looking at in a deposit draft, because again, further assessment is required on those to see kind of what sites would make up the housing numbers we've identified as being, we think, the right level of growth for the Vale. But sites of this size, if they were proposed for Cambridge, they will be appearing in the strategy now. Sorry, I've just recalled one point that Councillor Driscoll made earlier, which is relevant to the numbers, which I forgot to address earlier, but I'll say it now. The 6,000 that I referred to as kind of being like we could rely upon, that means it's only 2,600 new ones. That's not all existing allocations. Some of it is permission, but also a proportion of that, quite a good proportion of that, is what we call windfall developments. So based on trends of how many dwellings come forward through a planned period on unallocated sites. So that might be as small as converting a house to 2 flats, or it might be 80 flats on Subway Road up to the dock office. We use previous trends of windfall to identify what we think can come forward. So for Barry and Penarth, we've carried out like urban capacity studies which try to identify what land is available. So we haven't simply jumped to edge of settlement. So the site at North East Barry, we still feel that's needed to make up the housing growth we need. But alongside that, we've carried out an urban capacity study to try and show and explore what sites within the Vale, within Barry and within Penarth can come forward reasonably through the plan period. Does that answer your questions, councillors?
Yeah, thank you, Ian. So, Councillor Iannucci, did you want to come back in on that same point?
Yes, please. Just quickly, if it would be possible when this goes up to consultation, just for the wording or for the time, the method of transport sort of timing to be the same. So, like I said, a 15-minute cycle gets you considerably further than a 20-minute walk probably does. So if we could just use the same measurement for both, I think that would be much clearer for people.
Okay, sorry, did you mean you'd like to see what the walking time would be from the northern part of the site to compare with the walking time from the southern part of the site? Okay.
Yes, please. Or we use cycling for both, but just so it's easier to compare. Okay. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, Councillor Champion, did you want to come back in on your earlier point?
I have an additional point, Chair, if I may.
Yeah, if I can bring in then Councillor Driscoll, who's had his hand up for some time, and then I'll get to you, Councillor Champion, for your additional point. Thank you. Councillor Driscoll, please.
Chair, I'm quite happy for Charles to carry on if you like, and then I'll come in after him if it's easier.
Well, Councillor Ernest is next in line, so if you're ceding your position, you're ceding your position to Councillor Ernest.
I'll carry on then. No, sorry, Charles,
right.
I did try. At least stand down. Right.
I'll stand down and you go ahead.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
I think it's quite important, Ian, where we actually define this site, North Barry or in Dinas. I'm personally of the opinion it is in Dinas Powys, and I'm sure this will have an effect on the schools and health centres and facilities in Dinas, simply because if they're living in Dinas Powys, they've got Dinas Powys postcode, they will be able to put their kids down for schools and medical centres, etc. I'd like to know how many brownfield sites there are in the Vale that could be developed, how many houses that could entail. And also, it's something that I've noticed earlier. The council are very good at kicking the can down the road. I mean, Marcus mentioned 2036, and that gives the impression that these houses won't be built till then, and that's the time they got to build them. But we all know, you know, the second this is all rubber stamped, then they're ready to go. If this will put a huge strain on the Western Arga and St Andrews, Dinas Powys and the village. The traffic will, you know, a lot of the traffic will come that way. The alternatives are the bottom road through Cardiff Road, the 4055, the top road into Culverhouse Crotch, which is already over capacity, as we heard earlier. I appreciate the need for housing, especially social housing.
Councillor Driscoll, forgive me in interrupting you. If you're going to talk for much longer, and you're welcome to talk for a wee while longer, can I ask you to put your camera on, just to remind you that councillors need to be seen as well as heard when they're speaking at committee. So if you could pop your camera on and then continue, thank you.
I haven't done my hair, Chair. Anyway, can you got me now? Can you see me?
We can, thank you.
Oh, happy now? Okay. I've lost my thought now. Where was I? Okay. Also, as well, if it is actually labelled Dinas Powys, then the allocation of affordable housing will change. Surely, I think it goes to 40% for Dinas Powys, if I'm correct. Just one point I'd like to point out. Dinas Powys is really taking the brunt of the Vale planning policy. Sully's getting closer. Eastbrook is getting larger. Leckwith Keys, that's actually technically in Dinas Powys. They'll have a call on the facilities in Dinas Powys. In the last LGP, we had 400 houses plus the windfall sites. There's another 40 planned, I'm told, at Carleon Road. In the last couple of years, Dinas Powys has gone from approximately 3,000 to 300. It'll be 6,000 by the time it's all finished. I mean, that's incredible. That's incredible increase in size. There was talk recently that Dinas Powys would go from a village to a town. The way we're going, I think we'll have to skip the town and go straight to a city. It's getting that ridiculous. But I'll leave it with you now, Ian. The one last issue is the flooding. Both these sites in Dinas Powys that you're planning will feed into the Carrickston River. And we all know the problems with the Carrickston River. Although it feeds in below Dinas Powys, it'll come out onto the floodplains, which then will affect Selly Moors, and also it'll stop the flow of water through Dinas Powys. But it's something that needs to be addressed. Thank you, Ian. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Ian, do you want to come in on those specific issues? If there's anything you want to say to respond to that, please do, and then I'll invite Councillor Champion.
Okay, thanks. Yes, I will. Yeah, just again on the Dinas Powys versus Barry thing. I hope what I said earlier didn't imply or wasn't taken as being that we are ignoring its relationship to Dinas Powys. All I was simply saying was I think that the name it has doesn't prejudice how we're assessing the site, and any impacts on Dinas Powys, whether they be traffic impacts or education impacts or healthcare impacts, will be fully assessed. What the site is named doesn't alter the fact that the assessment of the impacts on Barry or Dinas Powys is still robust. I couldn't tell you how many brownfield sites there are in the Vale. Not a lot of big sites that could deliver strategic developments. One brownfield sites we always favour, of course, but we also have to show that sites are deliverable. So when we appear at a plan inquiry in front of an inspector with a series of sites, one of the first things they want to know is, are they deliverable? If you're relying on these sites to make up your housing numbers, how can you demonstrate that those are going to happen? So part of that is having landowners and site promoters that are active and saying, we want this site to be developed. We can show you it's viable to develop it and how we would develop it. So it's not simply a case of saying, there's all the brownfield land, we should develop on that. We have to show deliverability as well. That land usually has higher kind of costs associated with it in terms of remediation, but we don't have a lot of big brownfield sites left. Barry Waterfront was obviously a significant contributor to the existing plan. Flood risk, yeah, they're not in the flood zones. I said this before, and there would need to be evidence to demonstrate that developments would not worsen existing flood risk on those sites.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Champion, please.
Thank you. You could always just rename it as Lamb Between Dinas and Barry, and everyone will be happy. And also, you have sort of orange markers. If you put a big green marker between Dinas and this development to say this will be green space for the next 15 years or 20 years, then it might deter people coming with candidate sites to fill in the gaps, because I think there's a concern that Barry will become Dinas and Dinas will become Barry.
Marcus, do you want to come in on that point?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Champion has made a really good point there. I just want to pick up on for all members, which is that please remember this is the preferred strategy. So not everything in this document is the finished development plan. I think, Councillor Champion picked up on a few issues around Cowbridge, which Ian has alluded to, around housing numbers and employment, and also the issue of brownfield land was also raised by Councillor Driscoll. A lot of studies are being done at the moment, as Ian described, on a building block basis to get you to a stage where you can have a draft plan put in front of you. You'll look, if you see the timescale, there's quite a clear timeline set out where that will happen. This is actually quite at the front of the process, if you like, the start of the process. And all the comments that have been made today, all really good, really interesting comments, very, very relevant comments, they will all need to be fed into this process now over this 8 or 10 week consultation period, whatever it ends up being. And that process will then, that is why it takes so long to get from the draft preferred strategy stage now to the draft plan stage, which is a whole year essentially to get to that stage. So all those comments have to be considered in the round. Issues like green wedges, which Councillor Champions quite rightly pointed out there, and trying to prevent the coalition of settlements if that were to happen, those will all be part of the process of coming up with a final plan. So they won't be in here, Councillor Champion, but they will be very much on the minds of the team who are drafting the plan as it goes forward from this very process here. So thank you for raising that. I think that's a really good point, and one that we all need to take account of.
And Marcus, could you just, I think for the sake of all councillors, in terms of the number of questions that have been asked, in terms of the number of issues that have been raised, I mean, very helpful for you to confirm that all of that will be taken account of. So what's the process for capturing all of that? Because clearly we're not going to do that through tonight's committee meeting. So what's the opportunity for councillors to make sure that the views and issues that they've raised tonight, that they might want some further clarification on, or want to satisfy themselves that they have been captured? What's the process for that? I think it'd be helpful just to remind us of that. Yeah,
I think that's a really good point, Chair. The process is essentially when the consultation opens, and now you as councillors, actually you can put your comments in. I know Councillor Perry's put some comments in, a long list of comments which will be factored into that process as it opens. So you don't need to wait as the public are waiting now, and other consultees are waiting. If you want to make comments on anything, please put those in writing. You can submit them to Ian, you can submit them to me, you can submit them to Victoria, who is leading the preparation of the plan, at any time. And they will be factored in up until the point where the consultation process closes. So at the point where the consultation process closes then, which is likely to be, I'm going to say at the end of January now, it might be slightly longer, but we'll see what Ian will come up with a definitive date, I'm sure. And when that process closes, then all those comments that have been fed into that process, they will be distilled, they will be prepared, and answers given as to whether we wish to change things or whether we suggest they're not changed, whatever. That will be done in consultation with other colleagues, because we have to remember that these plans are prepared very much in consultation with Welsh Government as well, and there's a part of Welsh Government which looks at everything we're doing to assess that. And when a report comes back, there will be a report presented back to both Cabinet, this Scrutiny Committee and Council, which is the report which deals with the response to the consultation process for the preferred strategy. That will detail all the comments that have been received and what we've done against all of those comments. So it's really important. I'm glad it's creating a lot of interest. I think Ian is as well. That's what we want. We want all these comments to be factored into that process, and they will. But you will, as councillors, you will receive a report at various stages, right up to the stage of full council, which deals with the preferred strategy and the final outcome of that consultation process. So I hope I've explained that. And Ian, if I missed anything, because Ian is the expert, I'm not the expert. Ian is the expert, and Ian, if I missed anything.
Thank you, Marcus, and of course also as well as councillors being able to contribute at the consultation stage of the preferred strategy and then receiving a report back once that initial consultation is completed. My understanding is that there'll also be a further consultation of the deposit plan. So
absolutely,
this is very much the beginning of the process. So it's great that we're having so many issues and questions tonight. Councillor Ernest, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chairman. My internet cut out about 30 seconds ago, so I trust I'm still with you. Could I refer members to page 129 and 130 of the report before you? It's always very helpful when... Can you hear me? Can somebody say? Yep.
Yes, we can, Councillor. Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's always very helpful when members refer to a page in the agenda rather than having to flip through 150 pages to find the relevant one. I'm going to talk particularly about the land to the northwest of Penarth. You won't find it in the agenda. It's known as land to the north of Dinas Powys, but I prefer to call it the land to the northwest of Penarth because I believe that some of the land, not necessarily all, but some of the land lies within the boundaries of Penarth Town Council area. And certainly the access which will come out on Cardiff Road will be on the Penarth side of the 30-mile-an-hour limit, which is a major problem and again lies within Penarth. So I'm concerned firstly, Chairman, about the description of the location. But coming back to the detail, this is the sole access onto one of the busiest roads in the Vale of Glamorgan, the Barry to Cardiff Road. It's clogged up for much of the day now, so by 2036 it'll be totally impassable in my view. And I think bringing out a new housing estate onto a main road such as that, bearing in mind that the Dinas Powys bypass has been scrapped by Welsh Government and there's no additional infrastructure being put in to cater for any additional traffic, not only on this site, but also the site that my colleagues in Dinas Powys have been talking about for part of the evening. Dinas Powys bypass has been abandoned. The traffic signals which will be put in, and the report refers to that in tonight, that will make the position even worse for flows of traffic. I don't agree that the active travel links to Eastbrook are good. I think they're poor. It's a question of crossing the road for young children and adults, very busy road. I won't hark on that, but I think the active travel links to Eastbrook Station and indeed the primary school are very poor. The pavement is very narrow along Cardiff Road, and there've been many accidents over the years. I don't think it'll be improved. They are also, the active travel links to Cogan are even worse. Cogan is mentioned in the report before us tonight, but quite honestly, it's a non-starter to walk from that side to Cogan Station, maybe down Andrew Road, past the leisure centre, or walking along the dual carriageway, which is known as Barry Road, is just an impossible situation for young people and adults. It's far from being a high-level site, in my view. I think it breaks any barriers between Landock, Penarth and Dinas Powys. Additional sites here, there's virtually no foliage on these fields. They'll be used for horse grazing for many years. During World War II, there was an American Army camp there. They got on all right, but they had army trucks and nobody else had vehicles on the road. So I think that far from providing a barrier between the settlements of Landoc, Western Penarth and Dinas Powys, this will simply create more of an urban jungle. And lastly, Chairman, I would say transport. There's only a bus every hour, as I understand it. The 93 bus, which used to run into Penarth half-hourly, has been cut back because of the loss of the bus subsidy scheme. That may be short-term, but it will impact on how people from that site get to and from work, bearing in mind there's no employment as such within Dinas Powys. So all in all, Chairman, I have grave doubts about the viability of this site, and I'm happy to say so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Innes. I don't think there's any specific questions that I would expect officers to be able to respond to. So no doubt you will raise those issues as part of the consultation process. And thank you for sharing them with us this evening. Councillor Elliott-Penn, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ian. Always comprehensive. Many of my colleagues have talked about where, and they have some legitimate concerns, and some of the sites might be controversial or not welcomed. My perspective on it is what we build. I am perfectly aware how big the shortage of housing is in the Vale, in Wales, in the UK. I mean, we should be upskilling people to build these houses as well, but that's another conversation. Coming from this, from my perspective as someone who builds houses and in the building game, I see far too much uninspiring building going on. There's a huge benefit to good design, use of materials, and how we build developments. Too many morph. This is my opinions, and this is not. There's no question in this, Ian. So I hope you forgive my comments. Too many morph into sort of bland, I think, uninspiring endless sprawls of the same house, the same materials. And I think that whatever we build, wherever we build, there needs to be a real imagination and creative use of material and design. If people have a higher sense of ownership over their environment, it has real impacts on well-being and social outcomes, also crime statistics. These things might seem really small, but actually they do have big consequences to the people who live in these new areas we're going to build. If when we're designing there's a village near Swindon called East Wychell. If you have a look at that, it's a new build, but it looks like a naturally grown organic village. There's creative use of design, materials, layout, the green spaces, the social spaces. They've really thought about how this comes together, and it lends for a much more pleasant environment to live in. And as I said, these have huge impacts. And I know things like that are referenced in SP6, creative and healthy, inclusive places and spaces. If that's really taken into account when we're building these projects, and I don't think any of my colleagues could deny that we really need to be building houses, I think people will see them slightly differently. I know they have concerns, but if they see that actually the developments that we're going to build actually have a benefit to the area, then I think that objections might be lessened. I'd like to see as much of the existing trees, so any mature trees that can be saved, because to replace the biodiversity of a big tree takes a long time, or is actually impossible. And it's kind of, from my perspective, it's a holistic approach to how we do these developments. If the people who live in them really care for them, then I think they'll be more welcomed by the people around them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to remind committee that we will be receiving a report on the tree strategy, just to take your last point, Councillor Penn, at some point, and I will assume that that will take account of the revised local development plan, and we'll certainly have the opportunity to scrutinise whether or not those things are joined up. So thank you for all of those comments. Councillor Prothero, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got two questions. One to do with the topic of sewage. I'm sorry. Our sewers are our sewers and they're already overloaded. So I generally would like to just ask you, where we are planning on building very large estates with hundreds of homes, it's how we work with Welsh Water and have confidence that what we're doing isn't going to cause more of an issue. That was the first one, and it's generally because I would really like to know how we do that. And the second question, and I can see that there's lots of affordable housing planned in certain areas, but how much of that do you think will relieve the homelessness issue that we have? Because even affordable homes are out of the reach to so many of our residents. So that's it. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. Sweet good.
Thank you. Ian or Marcus, do you want to come back in on those 2 points?
Yeah, sure. In terms of sewage, so yeah, we are really heavily reliant on Welsh Water as a consultee on these things. And that's not just on planning applications; it's also at the kind of the plan preparation stage. I mean, as a general rule, if there's not capacity in the area to deal with the development, then we would at best condition a planning permission to say that an exercise, modelling assessment and exercise has to be carried out before anything can be done to demonstrate what improvements to the infrastructure are needed to accommodate development, and then there would typically be a restriction on certainly no later than occupation, but either development or occupation of anything until those improvements have been implemented. So we have to rely on Welsh Water for that advice. And the second question about affordable housing, it's really difficult to say what. I mean, it's easier to quantify, obviously, what proportion of the overall housing in a planned period, what proportion that being affordable does in theory for kind of a waiting list and need. It's still not perfect, because there's a lot of latent need which we don't know about. Typically you only see some need when developments come online, then you see people registering and applying for houses. I mean, in terms of homelessness, it will, I would say, inevitably have some impact, but it needs to go alongside the council's own programme, its own plan of building houses, and the more houses we can build as a council, the more affordable houses we can secure on market sites, it takes pressure off existing facilities that do provide necessary kind of homeless facilities. We need to reduce that, for the fundamentals of to give people places to live, but also because it's a cost for the council of having to provide kind of ad hoc services for dealing with homelessness. In short, I think it's really difficult to kind of quantify, but the two things go hand in hand. And I think inevitably, if we can be delivering on large sites in the areas where the need is the highest, we're going to be making meaningful improvements towards trying to deal with the homelessness crisis.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Marcus, do you want to add anything to that before I bring in Councillor Driscoll?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just to add that really, well, two things really. One about the issue of Welsh water and sewage. Those sorts of issues are not unusual. In Cowbridge, developments have been prevented from starting until such time as adequate sewage provision is provided, and indeed a development in Bombleston as well. They had to actually make a contribution in that development to upgrade a sewage system. So it's not unusual. It wouldn't necessarily be at this stage. So the detail is not at this stage. The detail comes afterwards, after those formal consultations about sites are undertaken with Welsh Water. But as Ian has said, they are key. They are key consultees on this proposal, and they will make comments about what is needed to be done to upgrade, and if a developer will have to submit or put a contribution to that as part of that process. And then secondly, just regarding the housing and homelessness, obviously this plan is drafted with full consultation with our colleagues in the housing department, and when we will be looking at what type of affordable housing, and remember the definition of affordable housing is quite broad, what types of affordable housing are required in certain areas. As Ian alluded to, it may well be that on the back of need shown through housing surveys and other needs identified, we might, as a council, decide to step in and build some of the affordable housing ourselves. It could be our social housing colleagues in social housing provider colleagues. But in each case, what's provided has to be in accordance with what our housing colleagues are asking for. So if there is which there will be, a need for housing to deal with people who are currently homeless, then that would form part of any development on a wider scale. So just to say that, that definition is very broad, and I appreciate that, of affordable housing, but it does go from the level of housing which is needed for people who are currently homeless, right up to housing, 4-bed housing needed for families and that type of thing. So it's a really broad spread.
Thank you, Marcus. Councillor Driscoll, thank you for your patience.
I got lots of patience, thanks. Just one.
Could you put your camera on, Councillor Driscoll,
God.
so I don't have to interrupt you again? Thank you.
I have to do my hair again. Yeah, there we go. Just a quick one, Ian. Colbrook Farm in Argyle.
Sorry, Councillor, your camera is still not on.
Oh no, hold on. What's going on? Show mine. Oh, there we go. Just a quick one. Colbrook Farm in Argyle, I'm reliably informed, is actually in the floodplain. That's on the southern side of the development. That's all I wanted to add, actually. I want to finish off by saying that I'm not a NIMBY. I accept that we do need more houses. I accept we need affordable houses and more of them. But I do feel that Dennis Powers is taking the brunt of your planning policy at the moment. Thank you for your time. Thanks, Chair. Cheers, Ian. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you. And Councillor Perry, please.
Hi again. Yeah, I can echo what Elliot Penn said earlier, and it's very, very important in what we build, and what we build and going to build should determine where we build it. And in some ways, we're a little bit the wrong way around here. We're doing it perhaps together, but we should have really decided and put into concrete what we're going to do before we put forward where we're going to do it. I've obviously submitted some comments forward because I think in terms of strategy, I'm not sure of our direction. I've seen the word sustainability quite a few times, but how we're going to become more sustainable or reduce our footprint on the earth, it's not clear. The vision isn't exciting. I think this goes back to what Elliot and others have said. I don't get enthused by the vision. This is not going to make our communities better, whether you're living in a new community or an existing community. It's all sort of very, very vague. It's too vague for me. And I think Ian Robinson did say that there's going to be additional traffic. But in our climate situation, if we're doing something that generates additional traffic, we've failed. We seriously need to reduce car ownership, the need to own a car, and the number of private car journeys by switching to active travel and to more public transport, which includes on-demand travel. So I think we are already seeing some sort of flaws in the plan. Now, I know the consultation is now scheduled for December, but I would have hoped we might have had a bit more of a detailed plan as to how we're actually going to reduce car ownership, perhaps with car clubs. But in this plan now at this stage, so we're taking that to public consultation, not a plan that's going to increase car use. Hidden in the document is park and ride. Park and ride is transport for people who own cars. Now, I think we lost Cosmiston in the last LDP, thank goodness. Junction 34 is still being mooted as a possible one, and there's one in St Nicholas. But in order to use those, you've got to own a car, and they are so expensive to operate. You have to have, a big site for your big car park, lighting, security, and then you have to have a frequent bus service, which most of the time runs empty. And if you don't get a car, all the funding for public transport has gone into your park and ride. And perhaps that's some of the problems Cardiff are experiencing at the moment. District heating, there's no mention of the source of heat. So where's the heat going to come from? So in the strategy, if you're going to mention district heating, first you need to know where that heating is going to come from. It's very weak on active travel, promoting active travel. We need to be delivering, prioritizing, not promoting with little leaflets, perhaps. The days of travel plans and telling people where they can catch the bus or ride a bike, those days are gone. That was the past. We're now actually in the future. What people talk about as being a long-term environmental plan, it's here, it's now. We've been 20 years doing nothing. It's weak on public transport. There's no on-demand transport mentioned. Same old, same old. We'll build some railway stations somewhere down the line in the future. Again, there's little opportunity for self-build, and this goes back to what Elliot was saying as well. The most innovative builders are the self-builders, and if you're building yourself, you can save a lot of money compared to a very similar house built by a large developer. So why isn't it part of our strategy to make plots available to self-builders and encourage self-building, perhaps even in small rural communities? If we can build 7, 10 affordable homes in a minor rural settlement without public transport, why can't we build 1 or 2 eco homes by self-builders, our own residents, allow them, give them opportunity? So I think it's clear that I think there's still work to be done. I know it's a very difficult task, and I sat down last night and just listed things from the top of my head, and I did that last week, and I've circulated those so you can see what just came off the top of my head. I think there's more people. Alexander, she mentioned doctor surgeries and all that sort of infrastructure, which I've not really mentioned in my what I've written. We need perhaps more focus groups before we go to a public consultation. That's my opinion. Others may disagree, but I think we need to really get this strategy focused and forward thinking. I'll leave you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And obviously, as you referenced, your comments have been shared with committee members, and as officers have already reassured us, they will be considered as part of the consultation process. Marcus, you've come on screen. I don't know whether there was anything in particular that you wanted to respond to that was raised. If so, please do.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, it was just to reiterate, because I know I've come on to reiterate many things as you have, Chair, today, but just to reiterate, Councillor Perry referred to this plan not being adequate. Please remember, this isn't the plan. This is the draft preferred strategy. The plan will come as the next stage of the process. The draft plan will come, and a lot of the things referred to by Councillor Perry are very detailed issues, things such as plots and that type of development and individual small and medium developer type plots for development. They would be something that possibly would be considered as part of the actual replacement local development plan. They wouldn't be part of the much wider strategy, spatial strategy, which we're looking at here, which is what we're consulting on. So I think I just wanted to reiterate, I know I've done it a few times today, and I'm sorry I keep coming in and sounding like a bit of a broken record, but this is the preferred strategy document. This is not the plan. We have gone perhaps a stage further to identify some of the strategic sites which have been suggested to us through the process we've already undertaken, which was the initial call for sites. But those are still very much at this stage part of this wider strategic consultation, and this is not the plan. So I'm just reiterating that for all members to understand, and this really is the time to get in there, make your comments. The things you are really interested and enthused about, please make those comments, and we can consider them as part of the process as we move towards the plan proper, the draft plan proper, over the next 12 months.
Thank you so much, Marcus. That's a really helpful reminder. We all want to live, don't we, in a Vale that's vibrant, inclusive, sustainable communities. And so I want to thank committee members.
Chair, can I come in there quickly?
Sorry, Councillor Driscoll.
Yeah, just a quick one.
Final comment from you with your camera on, if you will.
Oh, here we go again. I love the camera. Sorry. So what you're saying there, Marcus, is it's not in rubber. It's not set in stone. In this these plans, and there is. So if you come up with plenty of arguments against these sites in Dinas Powys, then there's a possibility it could be getting taken out. Am I right in saying that?
This is just preferred strategy. There is always a chance with all of these sites. So Ian has already said that while there's been some initial consultations around some of the sites and a sifting process, because we've had a call for sites, and there's been an initial sifting process which has been undertaken, which has identified these. That's not the same as actually consulting on capacity. For example, there could, for example, be an issue where actually uneconomic to provide a sewer link to somewhere, or there could be an issue which we were unaware of, which means that the sites can't come out of, and it could be through this consultation process something like that is brought to our attention. So this is in no way the end game. There's a long way to go. The comments anyone makes during the course of this consultation will be very relevant and will be considered, and when we do a report back to you as councillors, whenever that might be, when they've been fully considered, if we discount what you say or whatever any member of the public says, we will tell you why we have. But there's always a chance that we could find something which means that a particular site is not suitable for a particular reason. So the answer is yes, they're not set in stone. These are the initial, following our call for sites process and the sifting of those, an initial sifting of those, that this is what has been identified and this is what we are looking at as part of the strategy. Remember, the strategy is really, I suppose, in two parts. The strategy identifies where we are looking at growth, which is that band, as you can see, from the sort of the east of the Vale, which is the most sustainable part of the Vale in terms of a number of different reasons, but for transport, there's more facilities and services there, and for a number of other reasons. But also, as part of that process and part of the site selection process that's happened already by virtue of us putting a call out for sites, that's what was come to us now. That doesn't mean that's the end game. It can change considerably by virtue of all sorts of reasons before we get to the actual draft replacement local development plan stage. So I hope I've been clear on that, but this is not the end game. Just to be really, really clear on that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chair. Again, that's it now. I'm finished.
Thank you very much. Thank you, councillors. Ian, you wanted to come in with one final comment, and then I'm going to draw us to a close.
Yeah, really briefly. I just want to clarify for the avoidance of any doubt what Councillor Driscoll said about the North East Barry Dinas Powys site is correct. The very southern part is in a flood area, but there is no developable areas shown as being within that bit, so that would just be green infrastructure. So where I've referred to development not being in the flood zone, it's essentially the developable part of that site. So I just want to make that point, so that there was no doubt about that before the meeting ended.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. That's really helpful. Thank you, councillors. I think we've had a really good, rich discussion about the plan this evening. That's really helpful. The one, I think, specific issue which I picked up, which I think, Ian, you said you would take away and look at, is whether or not there's a possibility of extending the timescales for consultation in relation to the delivery agreement, taking account of councillors' concerns that falls over the Christmas holiday. And no doubt we'll be hearing the outcome of that request. But otherwise, as I say, just remains for me to thank councillors and Mrs Jenkins for the contribution this evening. And just to reiterate, this very beginning of the process, we all have the opportunity to contribute to it and to raise the points that have been discussed tonight through the consultation process. I don't have any other business on the agenda, so just remains for me to thank you, and I look forward to seeing councillors.
Point of order, Chair.
You can make a point of order, Councillor Hooper.
Haven't we got a purpose now? Haven't we got to seek approval for this?
I can bring Gareth in, but my understanding is we're not being asked to approve. That's not a matter for us, that's a matter for full council. Scrutiny Committee was asked to consider the revised local development plan, which we've done. But Gareth, could you just clarify that, please?
I suppose the key issue is Chair, anything to go back to Cabinet. Does the committee feel strong enough that the views to go back to Cabinet? So I'm not seeing anything raised, Chair, just general comments. So it's from my perspective nothing to go back, but I'm happy to be corrected, Chair.
No, I agree. As I say, I think we've had a significant number of issues raised tonight, which will be considered as part of the consultation process. And just to reiterate, Councillor Hooper, we're not being asked to approve the RRDP. We were simply asked to consider it. I've equally not captured any specific issues that need to go back to Cabinet. But I can see Councillor Charles and Councillor Perry, you both have your hands up. Councillor Champion.
We have this special council meeting on the 20th, at which this is, I think, going to be at. Is that correct? And we've talked about this sort of 2-week extension to the consultation period, and it'd be good if that could be bottomed out by that council meeting.
Yes, thank you for that point. No doubt Ian will take that away and we'll clarify that before the 20th. Can you just confirm that, Ian?
Yeah, I will certainly.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Perry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if our comments today should be more formal, going back to Cabinet as to what we said, rather than them having to trawl through the minutes and find things. Is there any summary as to what we've said and the points you raised? For example, the extension to the consultation idea, just to make it a little bit more formal.
So we can certainly take back, if that's what committee want, we can certainly feed back that view that there should be an extension to the consultation period in relation to the delivery agreement to ensure that there's sufficient time for consultation given the Christmas period. I'm seeing nods from committee members, so yes, we will certainly feed that back in advance of the 20th of November consideration.
Yeah, just to clarify, Chair, that we need to go back to Cabinet then, because the process says it goes back to Cabinet for agreement and then be referred on to full council. So that will have to go on Thursday.
Yeah,
thank
you. Thank you. Thank you, committee. I look forward to seeing you again on the 12th of December. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good night, Chairman.
Good night, all.
Night.